Hey everyone, welcome to the channel where I share creepy and scary stories that will give you chills. If you love horror and spooky tales, make sure to subscribe and join me every week for a new story. Let's get into the dark side together. The road to Ashridge wasn't on any map. Dr. Miriam Vale had driven for 7 hours straight, through forests so dense they press against the road like lungs inhaling. The GPS had died hours ago. No signal, no stars. Only the voice in her dreams remained, repeating that single word like a spell. Ashridge. She didn't know what she expected. A signpost? A welcome banner? Instead, the trees simply ended. And beyond them, a single-lane road, wet with mist and silent with age. At the end of it, a town that looked like it had been abandoned decades ago, but wasn't. She parked near a crooked post office. A man in a long coat and gray cap stared from behind fog glass. When their eyes met, he simply nodded once, then turned away, disappearing into the shadows like dust. No one spoke. No one moved quickly. No lights flickered behind the curtains. It felt like a painting, or a place that hadn't fully decided to be real. She walked with her hands in her coat, feeling the cold settle into her bones. Past a broken diner, a crooked church, an alley where water never drained. And then she saw it, the sanatorium. It stood at the northern edge of town like a rotting tooth in the hillside. For stories high, windows like black eyes. Its sign had long since fallen, but the rusted iron archway still bore faint letters. Ashridge Home for the Mind. EST 1907. The front doors were slightly ajar. Inside, darkness. But from deep within, something moved. And then it came. Bong. A bell. Not electronic. Not mechanical. Old. Heavy. Alive. Miriam froze. That was the sound from her dreams. Exactly the same tone. Same pitch. Her heart quickened. Not fear. Not quite. Recognition. She stepped through the door. The air smelled of damp earth, iodine, and something that made her think of iron and static. The floor creaked beneath her. Walls were lined with broken patient files. Rusted bed frames leaned like drunk skeletons. A chair rocked gently on its own. And at the far end of the hall, she saw it. A brass bell, mounted high on the wall, strings dangling loosely like veins. She walked toward it, hand raised, then froze. Someone had written on the wall beneath it, carved, not painted. You heard it because you're missing. She turned sharply, but no one was there. Missing. The word burned in Miriam's mind like a splinter under skin. She turned from the bell. The hallway was empty again. Or maybe it had always been. In Ashridge, time wasn't something that passed. It was something that curled. Outside, the rain had started again. Not loud, just enough to blur the edges of things. The general store was still open. Miriam stepped inside. A small brass bell above the door rang, but no one was there. The air smelled like dry paper and mothballs. Tick, tick, tick. She followed the sound to the back wall. A dozen clocks lined the shelf, all different makes, none showing the same time. One ran backward. Another clicked every 11 seconds. Most weren't even working. Behind the counter sat a man with pale skin and gloved hands, polishing the gears of a grandfather clock. His name tag read, Abel. Miriam cleared her throat. Do you fix all of them? He didn't answer. She tried again. Why do none of them match? Still silence. Then she noticed Abel wasn't looking at the clocks. He was listening to them. Eyes closed, lips sealed, fingers moving gently over mechanisms like a pianist over familiar keys. Click, click, tick, tick. It was like he was playing a song only he could hear. She stepped closer. I'm Miriam Vale. I'm staying in town for a while. Abel opened one eye. His iris was completely gray. Not cloudy, not blind, drained, like the color had been erased. He tilted his head, then, without a word, reached under the counter and pulled out a small pocket watch. He handed it to her. On the back, etched into the metal, were the words, "Set this to when you started forgetting." She blinked. I don't forget things. Abel smiled faintly and mouthed one word, Yet, Miriam left with the watch in her coat pocket. She didn't wind it. Not yet. But later that night, in the rented room above the post office, she noticed something odd. There were no clocks anywhere in Ashridge that read the same time, except one. The watch. It now read 3:33 a.m., exactly the time the bell rang in her dreams. She hadn't wound it. She hadn't touched it. And still, it ticked. The pocket watch ticked steadily from her coat. 3:33 a.m., exactly as the bell began to ring again. Bong, bong, bong. This time, it wasn't from the sanatorium. It was from outside her window. Miriam rushed to the window and pulled back the curtain. Two children stood in the middle of the empty street, motionless. Twins. A boy and a girl, no more than 10. Pale skin. Bare feet on the cold, wet asphalt, each holding a single red thread, trailing off in the fog behind them like fishing lines cast into a black sea. She opened the window. The girl turned her head slowly. Miriam froze. Her eyes were completely black. Downstairs, the front door creaked, but no one entered, and the ticking stopped. She left the room with a flashlight in one hand and Abel's watch in the other. The children hadn't moved. As she approached, they both raised their hands. Slowly, exactly at the same moment, they pointed down Elder Lane, the road that curled behind the chapel ruins. Then they both spoke in unison. If you follow the thread, you won't forget your name. Miriam's throat went dry. Who are you? The girl spoke first. I'm Ray. Then the boy. I'm Noah. A pause. But only one of us is real. Miriam took a deep breath. Which one? They said nothing, just dropped their threads and turned toward the woods. She hesitated, then picked up Ray's string. It was warm, and followed. The forest behind the chapel was unnaturally quiet. No wind, no insects, no moonlight. The trees leaned inward as if eavesdropping. The thread guided her between trunks and roots, toward a clearing. At the center, a stone well, covered in moss. Its edge cracked with time. The thread ended here. Then from inside the well, a faint sound, musical notes, soft singing. A lullaby, off-key, childlike, musical note. She leaned over the edge, and something blinked back at her. Suddenly, her hand let go of the flashlight. It tumbled down into the dark, and before it hit the bottom, she saw her own face looking back, but younger, barefoot, wearing a hospital gown. Miriam ran from the well. The lullaby followed her for 27 steps. Then silence. Ray and Noah were gone. So was the thread. She didn't sleep. The next morning, if that's what it was, she walked through the mist toward the old chapel ruins. A white sign hung over the crooked door. Elsie lives here now. God doesn't. Inside, the air was thick with lavender and mildew. Rows of unlit candles lined the walls, wax dripping like frozen blood. Crude charcoal sketches were pinned everywhere. Faces with their eyes scratched out, symbols resembling tuning forks, and a recurring motif of a ringing bell with 7 cracks. At the altar sat a woman in a nurse's uniform. Yellowed with age, a small rust-colored stain over the heart. She was humming, the same lullaby from the well. Sister Elsie? Miriam stepped cautiously inside. The woman's eyes snapped open. They were completely normal. Almost too normal. Blue, sharp, awake. I saw you, Elsie whispered. In the smoke last night. You followed the thread. Miriam nodded. Elsie smiled thinly. They always follow the thread. That's how they find you again. Who? Miriam asked. The parts of you that want to come back. Elsie stood, her movement smooth despite her age. You want to know what they did in that place, don't you? In the sanatorium. Miriam hesitated. Yes. Elsie walked toward a locked cabinet, pulled a key from around her neck, and opened it. Inside, old folders. Patient files. Each one marked with a red number and a frequency. She handed Miriam one marked. Subject 041 VLE. Exposure level. Type 3 dual response. Result. Incomplete fragmentation. Miriam's hands trembled. VLE? Her last name. Elsie's voice softened. The bell was never meant to call spirits, dear. It was meant to split minds. Ashridge was a test site. The frequency was tuned to something beneath language, something that unthreads the soul. Miriam looked up. My family was part of this. Elsie's smile faltered. No, dear, your mind was. At that moment, every candle in the chapel flickered out, and from the shadows behind the altar, a voice came. She remembered. Miriam turned, but there was nothing, just her reflection, on the glass of a framed photo that hadn't been there before. In it, Sister Elsie and a young girl, maybe 7 years old. The girl was Miriam. The picture frame was warm. Miriam stared at her younger self beside Sister Elsie. Same hair, same eyes, even the small scar above her left eyebrow. But the photo was age-stained at the edges and dated. March 12, 1992. Ashridge staff child enrollment. That would have made her 5 years old. She couldn't remember ever being here. Later, she found herself wandering the town with the pocket watch in her hand, watching it tick out a rhythm that made no sense. At 4:17, the bell didn't ring. At 4:18, she looked up and saw a man on the roof of the town hall. He was drawing. Paperclip Merrick Dean, the archivist. He sat cross-legged, shirtless despite the cold, sketching with black ink directly onto the shingles of the roof. When she called out, he didn't respond. She climbed the outer fire escape to reach him. Merrick. He looked up, blinked once, then went back to drawing. What is that? She asked. He held up a sheet. A hand-drawn map of Ashridge. Every street, every building. But something was wrong. There was no north, no compass, no direction. Just floating structures, roads that bent into loops, buildings marked with changing names. The sanatorium had 3 different locations depending on the version he held. Miriam furrowed her brow. Why are there so many copies? Merrick looked at her for the first time. His pupils were vertical, like a cat's, or a snake's. He whispered, every time someone remembers a different version of the town, it becomes real. She flipped through the pages. Dozens of maps, some with rivers that didn't exist, others with entire districts made of mirrors. One had a second sanatorium labeled The Copy. Miriam clutched her head, a sharp throb above her temple, like a knife sliding between thoughts. Which one is real? She asked. Merrick answered without blinking. None are real, but one of them remembers you. He handed her the newest map, drawn in red ink, fresh. It showed a door behind the sanatorium, not one she'd seen. It was labeled only, you came through here. Miriam stepped back. I came through the forest. Merrick nodded. No, that's what the surface part of you remembers. The deeper part, the one that's waking up, came through the door. She looked at the page again. Now the door on the map had a symbol, a bell split down the middle. The path behind the sanatorium hadn't been there before. Miriam was certain of that. Trees leaned back as if something unseen had recently passed through. The air was thicker here, like she was breathing through wet velvet. She followed the line from the map, red ink, still fresh in her pocket, until it ended at a concrete wall. And there it was, a door, metal, bolted, no knob, but the most unsettling part, there was no frame. The door simply hovered in the middle of the wall, flush, clean, like someone had drawn it onto reality and dared it to stay. Etched across the metal surface was a symbol, a bell split down the center, 7 small marks beneath it, like teeth, and above the symbol, words she had seen before in her dream, now physically carved. Only the part that listens may enter. She touched it. The metal pulsed under her fingers, faintly warm. Behind her, the wind stopped. The trees stopped moving. Even her heartbeat slowed. And then she heard it again. Musical note, a lullaby. Musical note. Soft, childlike, familiar. But this time, the voice was hers. A recording. Singing to no one. The door hissed and opened inward, not into another room, not into the sanatorium, into black, pure, swallowing dark. No floor, no light, but something breathed on the other side. Not air, information. Miriam stepped through, and immediately she was not alone. All around her, she saw versions of herself. One holding a scalpel, drenched in red. One chained to a hospital bed, mouth stitched shut. One wearing Abel's gloves, adjusting 1,000 clocks. One standing over a child's body, weeping. And in the center, a version of her with no face. Just a mirror. It reached out, its fingers touched her temple, and whispered, "You came through here once before, but you didn't leave." Miriam tried to move, but the black pulled at her ankles. Thick, wet, alive. The mirror self leaned closer. "There's still one more part of you asleep, and it's the part we need to wake." Then, bong, from inside her own skull. The sound exploded outward. Everything fractured. She awoke lying outside the door again. But the door was gone. So was the path. So was the map. But in her palm, something cold. A shard of mirror. With her, I reflected in it. But the pupil was glowing white. The world had narrowed to sounds. The ticking of the reverse watch. The faint hum beneath her skull. And somewhere, breathing, Miriam opened her eyes. She was in a room. Not in Ashridge. Not anywhere she'd ever seen. Just a room. White, bright, cold. One chair, one table, one file, and a child. A boy, about 9. His feet didn't touch the floor. He swung them absently, humming. She recognized the melody. The lullaby. He looked up and smiled. "Hi, Miriam." Her throat tightened. "Do I know you?" He shrugged. "You forgot." "That's okay. They made you forget. That's what the bell does." She stepped forward. "What's your name?" The boy tilted his head. "You gave me one, but it wasn't real. I was just part of the split." The file on the table was already open. She didn't remember opening it, but her name was on the first page. Project VLE. Subject, Miriam Vale. Status, successful fragmentation / stage 2. Secondary split, Unit 0 proxy child. Connection, emotional anchor only. Disposal scheduled, incomplete. The page was dated 21 years ago. Miriam sat down slowly. "You're me?" The boy nodded. "Not all of you, just the part you gave away, so you could survive." "You weren't chosen," she whispered. He smiled again, sad this time. "I wasn't supposed to stay, but I heard the bell anyway." He reached into his shirt and pulled out something shiny. A small cracked bell, just like the one in the sanatorium. "I kept this, so I'd remember I was real." He held it out. "But it's broken, just like me." Miriam took it. It was warm. And then, her white eye flickered. Not from outside influence, but from within. And suddenly she saw it. All of it. The experiments. The bell chamber. The room with 7 mirrors and no doors. The boy's voice softened. "You locked me in here so they couldn't find me. But now you brought me back." A long silence. Then Miriam leaned forward. "I remember now." The boy smiled wide and vanished. In her palm, the cracked bell turned black and rang on its own. Bong. The bell had never spoken before, but now, in the stillness, it answered. Bong. But not with sound, with intention. Miriam stood in the middle of Elder Lane, holding the blackened bell in her hand. It was pulsing, not like a heart, but like a consciousness, as if it recognized her. Around her, the townspeople stood in silence, not frozen, waiting, as though they'd all heard something she hadn't yet. Then the voice, not in her ear, not in the sky, but in the white eye. "Do you hear it now?" She blinked. The world cracked. A hairline fracture through her vision. The town shimmered. Buildings shifted slightly left. Streets twisted like muscles. Signs rewrote themselves. The general store became the nursery. The post office, a recording chamber. Ashridge was rearranging itself, and only she could see it. She dropped to her knees. "What are you?" she whispered. The bell's voice came again, slower now. We are what you cut out. We are what you rang to bury. We are the echoes of all yourselves. And we heard you. Suddenly, faces appeared around her. Abel, Elsie, Ray, Noah, Merrick, each of them standing still, watching. But something was wrong. Their eyes, they were all white, just like hers. She turned in place. Every person in Ashridge had the same eye. Then she understood. These were not people. These were reflections, copies, created by the bell to protect the truth. Miriam looked back at the bell in her hand. If I ring you again, the voice finished your sentence. You'll see it all. No more doors, no more mirrors, no more names, only the truth. She stood. The entire town now faced her, waiting. The sky above flickered like a dying bulb. Reality was slipping. She raised the bell, and before she rang it, she whispered, then let it all come back. Bong! The town collapsed inward, not destroyed, absorbed. Every building folded like paper. Every figure vanished into mist. And Miriam woke up, but not in a bed, in a sanatorium. Alone, strapped to a chair. Mirrors on all sides. A speaker above her head crackled. A voice, her own voice, said, Stage 3 complete. Subject fully reintegrated. Prepare for final fracture. And a new bell rang, but not outside, inside her skull. Silence. Pure, blinding silence. Not the absence of sound, the murder of it. Miriam sat in the middle of the white chamber, straps around her wrists, wires trailing into the floor. A single bell on a tray before her, surrounding her on all sides. 7 mirrors, but none of them showed the same reflection. Mirror 1. She was a child, wide-eyed, staring at the bell like it was a gift. Mirror 2. She was a nurse, clipboard in hand, watching others scream as frequencies surged. Mirror 3. She was an experiment, electrodes on her skull, weeping without sound. Mirror 4. She was a monster, blood under her fingernails, eyes glowing white. Mirror 5. She was a mother, holding a child with no face. Mirror 6. She was gone, just an empty chair, a still-strapped echo. Mirror 7. She was herself, now, watching. Then the room spoke, her voice again, but deeper, like a version of her that had been underground for too long. All yourselves, all your bells, all your doors. You built this place to forget, but now it remembers. The mirrors shook. One cracked. Number 4. The monster. Miriam stared into it. The version of her with bloodied hands smiled back. I'm not the part you fear, it whispered. I'm the part you punished. Another crack. Mirror 2. The nurse. You volunteered, remember? To break yourself in pieces so you could hide what you did. Mirror 6. The empty chair shattered, and for a moment there was nothing. No self, no sound, just a bell on the tray. Miriam lifted it. The voice came one last time. You can ring it again and wake up clean. All memories erased, all selves quiet. Or you can break it and live with everything. She looked around at the shards, at all her fractured faces, and she smiled. Then she smashed the bell. Silence, not the murder of sound, but the birth of it. And when she stood, the room was gone. The straps were gone. The mirrors were gone. But the memories stayed. She walked out of the sanatorium barefoot, into the real Ashridge, not the projected one, not the experiment, but the town that watched it all. And this time, she remembered everything.